currently there are a lot of really good striker fire pistols being produced that are geared towards everyday carry or concealed carry. And if you're one of the millions of people that have recently become a new gun owner, and maybe you got a gun for home defense, but now you're thinking, I'd like to carry one every day as when I leave the house. You go to a gun store and you start to talk to the people at the gun store, and they'll probably show you a ton of different options, and they'll mostly all be striker fired. I'm willing to bet that. But I'd like you to know that you have another option, and that is a hammer fired gun. So what I want to do today is kind of discuss what I think are the four main categories or configurations for hammer fire semi-automatic pistols that you might carry every day, concealed in your waistband, appendix, etc., right? And give you a look at the different configurations and talk about what I think are some of the pros and possible cons to carrying one of these different configurations. All right, I'm back. Sorry, the battery was going dead. All right, so before I start, I just want to say that this conversation really isn't going to be about these four individual firearms. It's actually going to be about their configuration and manual of arms, which is general across that type of firearm. Also, some of the stuff in here is going to be my opinion. Please take it as such, right? If you're responsible enough to carry a firearm, you're capable of making up your own mind, and what I say should just be food for thought, right? And last but not least, all these guns have been safety checked. So if you're one of those people that just put their beer in the cup holder, started steering their vehicle with their knee so they could use both hands while writing a comment about how I'm being unsafe, we're good. And also you should probably drive with both knees, not just one. Anyway, so let's go ahead and start with this firearm. So this is commonly known as a double stack 1911, and the way that this firearm is carried, this is a Staccato CS, so Staccato calls their firearms 2011s, but this type of gun is commonly known as a double stack 1911. So it's a double stack 9mm. And the way you carry this is just like you would a 1911. You carry it cocked and locked. So I'll go ahead and, there's no magazine in the firearm. You would carry it cocked, hammer back, safety on, right? So you'd carry it cocked and locked. And in order to fire this firearm, you would have to draw it. This particular one, you'd have to depress the grip safety, push the thumb safety down, and then you could fire the firearm. And every subsequent pull, so the slide would cycle and it would return the hammer to the cock position. So this action's known as a single action only. So you might see SAO or SA next to this for the action. Some of the pros of a single action only firearm are that they've got some of the best triggers out there. So there's normally a really short to no take up. That's the entire take up. There's a really definitive wall. There's no creep whatsoever and the reset. That's the reset. So benefits of this firearm are it's got the best trigger that you can probably get. It's a straight back pull, so it's capable, so it's really easy to pull. It's also a repeatable, every pull is the same. And in this case, it's very safe to carry because not only are you carrying safety on, but you also have this grip safety that has to be fully depressed. So we'll take the safety off and it won't fire because the grip safety is not depressed. We'll depress the grip safety, put the safety on, won't fire. Take the safety off, press the grip safety, and you'll see that it'll fire, right? So this is a really safe way to carry this firearm. Some of these will have had this grip safety deleted. In competition, people oftentimes just pin this down because you don't need the grip safety in competition. You're shooting on a safe range, down range, you know what your targets are, etc. And you're purposefully drawing it. I mean, you don't need the grip safety, and it slows you down maybe a little bit, I guess. Although I've never had that problem because every time I grab this firearm, my hand depresses this perfectly. I've never drawn this firearm and not had my hand press the grip safety. So I actually, I have a carry gun that's a double stack 1911 that doesn't have this grip safety, and I don't carry it because while the safety on that gun is also very positive, I don't feel as comfortable because the trigger's so light. Just in case this somehow gets swiped off, I want to make sure that I've got as much safety as possible. Basically, as many things that I have to defeat as possible for when I actually want to fire the handgun. So positives about this: best trigger that you can probably get. Meaning that this gun's also going to be incredibly accurate because you have a straight back trigger pull. You're inducing less movement to your muzzle as you're pulling the trigger, right? That a lot of times when somebody's pulling the trigger, they'll actually be their own worst enemy. You're pulling down to the left if you're a right-hander normally, right? This helps remove that. Some of the cons of this firearm, I guess. One of the cons would be that you are carrying it cocked and this is exposed. While this gun's drop safe because of the grip safety, it's got a safety on it, etc. Imagine junk could get in here, and I guess when you did want to fire it, that might cause it not to fire. I imagine that would have to be an incredibly extreme situation to get enough stuff in here. Pocket lint, for instance, is not going to do that. But maybe mud or something. I don't know if you're having a gunfight at Woodstock while you're rolling around in the mud, maybe this gun won't fire. I don't know. But that could be one thing that could be a negative. Another negative potentially for this kind of firearm, or possible negative, is that if you do get in a situation where tensions are high and you do draw your firearm, and things are constantly changing, right? When you are in that situation, I imagine, and at the last second you decide not to fire, well, you don't have much. There's not much play here. Once you start to go, there's almost no turning back, right? So that could be a negative. Another downside of these kind of firearms. Not so much with this one. This one's kind of light. This one I think is 27 or 28 ounces. But some of these, actually it might be less than that. Some of these firearms can get relatively heavy. The other firearm that I'm talking about where I have the grip safety deleted, that's a carry firearm, and that firearm's like 34 ounces or something. It's pretty heavy. So that could be another downside. But if you want the best trigger that you can get, and probably one of the most accurate types of firearms that you can get is hammer fired, then the double stack 1911 is probably what you want to look into. All right, so we will go. Let's go clockwise. So the next one is a double action, single action with a safety. So you might see this as a DASA for double action, single action. And the way this firearm works, and again, there's no round in the chamber and it's been cleared. So the way this firearm works is you rack the slide, and then you have a round in the chamber, and you have to lower the hammer. So I'll show you how I do that. You hold on to the back of the hammer, you pull the trigger. It has to be off safety, by the way. Hammer moves forward a little bit, let go of the trigger, the hammer goes down to half cock. Now you have it in half cock. All right, so this is now safe to carry with or without the safety on. You can put the safety on and you won't be able to pull the trigger, or you can carry it without the safety on. And the first pull, and again, obviously there's no round in this chamber and there's no magazine in it. The first pull is long and very deliberate, right? So this might be an 8 or 9 pound trigger pull right here, I think. And the gun goes off. So at that point, the gun cycles. Here, we'll do this. The gun cycles. You have a shortened reset. There's the reset, much like you do on the double stack 1911. And now you're in basically single action like you would be with that firearm. And you have a shorter trigger pull, and each subsequent round that's fired goes like that, right? Now, if you want to, you can also carry this firearm cocked and locked like you do the double stack 1911. Some of the pros to this firearm are that first pull has to be a very deliberate pull. You're not going to do that by accident, right? It's pretty heavy. The other plus to this is that because you're carrying it in half cocked already, when you go to holster it, you can put your thumb over it, finger out of the trigger, and you can push it into your holster. And while you're reholstering or holstering, if something gets caught in the trigger, you'll feel, not only will you feel this pull because it's heavy, right? But you'll also feel this hammer start to move, so you can stop because you know you're about to, potentially fire the gun. You can stop pushing and adjust it. That's another benefit. So it's incredibly safe. So for people that carry appendix, and I'm not one of those people, I don't walk around all day with a gun pointed at my junk. But if you are one of those people that like to walk around like that, appendix, and there are plenty of them, this is probably one of the safest. Double action, single action is probably one of the safest ways to do that. Some of the downsides of this firearm. Well, one of the downsides, I guess, of this firearm is the inverse of the positive. It has such a heavy first trigger pull that you might induce some movement in your barrel as you're pulling, your muzzle as you're pulling the trigger. So it might be a little less accurate. That's one of the downsides. You can obviously practice with that, and in a self-defense shooting, if the person's close enough or whatever you're shooting at is close enough, that's not going to matter really. It's just not. Unless you have some kind of issue with strength in your wrists or fingers, your hands, then this is not the style of firearm for you, I would say. But otherwise, if that's not the case, you're not going to have any problem pulling this trigger. It's not like it's so heavy that it's going to slow you down or stop you, especially when you have adrenaline going, right? But also, it could move the muzzle around. It might be a little less accurate, maybe. Another issue with this firearm that I see people, and this doesn't bother me actually, but is the way that you go from when you first rack around into the chamber till you go to half cock. You actually have to hold the hammer, touch the trigger, and then it falls to half cock, right? So touch the trigger, let it go, falls to half cock. And you have to be pretty conscious of what you're doing there. That is something that I can understand why people might not like that, because there's around the chamber, if you screw up and this slips out of your hand, if it slips out of your hand, it will discharge your round. So if you're doing this, it needs to be pointed with an actual round in the chamber. This needs to be pointed in a really safe direction. There. So I can understand why that would bother some people. Those are the two cons to this kind of firearm, I think, is the heavy trigger, which is also one of the positives, and the way that you get to the half-cocked position. Otherwise, if you think about it, with such a heavy trigger on the first pull, let's say that at the very last microsecond you don't have to fire a round, you can return back from this. There you have a longer runway before you actually pull the trigger here, and there's no chance of you accidentally touching this off. So there's that. The next firearm is similar. Oh, and this is a CZ Shadow 2 Compact, if anybody wanted to know. But next firearm is actually another CZ. They were all sitting next to one another in the safe, so I grabbed these actually. This is a double action, single action, just like this one. Here's the difference. There's no safety. Now, the no safety on this, you put a magazine in, rack a round into the chamber, it's cocked. To decock it, right here, it goes to half cock automatically. So just keep your finger off the trigger and push this down. So that brings you to half cocked without having to manually do that. And this is a whole lot safer, especially if you've just fired some rounds and you're all stressed out and now you need to decock your firearm. Doing that with that one right there might be I don't know, maybe you make a mistake. It's possible, right? There's no mistake. That's it. So and again, it has the long first trigger pull, shortened reset, although this one has quite a long reset for a shortened reset, and then a crisper second strike, or second round, right? Subsequent round. So first trigger pull on both of these, I'm going to say, is 8-9 pounds. Second trigger pull on these is probably 3.5 to 4.5 pounds. Every trigger pull is the same on the single action only double stack 1911. That trigger right there, and there's options here, but that trigger right there is a 3-pound trigger. It's incredibly crisp. None of these are as crisp as that, right? But that's the first trigger pull and every other trigger pull after that, every other round fired. The first one is a lot heavier than the second one. The second one has a shorter reset and approaching this trigger. But the other thing about this trigger is it's a straight back pull, where this is still hinged, so it's not really straight back, completely straight back. All right, the next and last one that I have an example of here on the table is this one, and this one is a double action, single action, but it has a safety and a decocker. So everything about this firearm, both of these firearms, is put into this one firearm here. So again, no magazine, there's no round in the chamber, okay? So when you put a magazine in, rack the slide to put a round in the chamber, hammers back, you can carry this one on safe, or you can decock it, and that is actually half cocked. I know it doesn't look like it, but the hammer here is hidden, and I think it's hidden on this one, so there's less chance of getting junk inside of this, between the hammer and the firing pin here. Like here's half cock on this one. There's not a lot of chance of getting stuff in there. I mean, like I said, unless you're mud wrestling or something, but there's still some space there, right? That's what it looks like fully down. That one's fully down. But this is actually half cock, and you can see there's really no space in here. In fact, it's hard to get my finger on there to pull it back if I wanted to pull it back with my hand there, right? So that's half cock. We'll go ahead and pull the trigger, and you can see. So the first pull is a long pull, and this one's actually heavier than these two, to be honest. Then that's fully down. Each subsequent round, there's your reset, a lot shorter, right? So the pluses to this firearm, at least the setup of this firearm, because there's a lot of pluses to this firearm. This is a H&K USP compact. So this is almost indestructible. But some of the pluses about carrying this is that you get a lot of options here. You can carry it cocked and locked, although it doesn't have a grip safety. Just like if you carried this one cocked and locked, it wouldn't have a grip safety. You can carry this one, you can decock this one and carry it decocked like that, with or without the safety on, right? So you have every option possible. If I were to carry this gun, or if I was telling somebody about carrying this firearm, I would have them carry it round in the chamber, decocked, no safety on, right? Because there's no need to have a safety. Again, you can holster and reholster with your thumb. This has a really deliberate trigger pull for the first round, right? I mean, that's pretty stiff, right? This is probably a 10-pound trigger pull. This is a heavier trigger pull. But you have tons of options on how to carry this firearm. So those are the 4 main ones. I know there's some that I probably missed. There's also, and I don't know if any other company does this, maybe they do, but H&K also does what they call an LEM trigger, and that is so this is SA or SAO, so single action only. These are all double action, single action, so DASA, which means basically the first trigger pull is not only cocking the firearm but also firing it, and each of the next rounds that you fire after that with it already cocked, that's your single action. But H&K also makes an LEM, and I don't actually know what LEM stands for, doesn't even matter, but it's a DAO or DA, so double action only. What that means is that it starts out half cocked, so when you rack around into the chamber, it doesn't stay cocked. The hammer falls back, or follows the slide back to half cocked. And then every round that you pull, when you pull the trigger and the gun fires, it's not only moving the hammer back and letting it fall forward, but the hammer doesn't come back and stay cocked when the action cycles. It actually goes to the half cock, so every pull is basically the double action pull. And with H&K, they kind of split the difference on the trigger weights there. So it's not as light as the single action pull of this gun, for instance, or any of these guns, and it's also not as heavy as the double action of these firearms. And what that one does, and I don't actually have one of those, but what that does is it allows you to get like a striker fire handgun where you get the same exact pull every time, which is one of the benefits of a striker fired gun. It's always the same trigger pull, but it also lets you get all the safety features and the action of a hammer fired gun. So you can still ride the hammer forward with your finger like this when you're holstering it, and you still have somewhat of a heavier first trigger pull to make sure that it's completely intentional and every opportunity is given to not fire around. So that's another option. And I know H&K does that. I don't know if any other companies have a double action only semi-automatic handgun. So that is the main 4 that I know about, plus the one we just talked about. So you have options with a hammer-fired handgun that you don't really get with a striker-fired gun. Some hammer-fire setups are a lot safer to manipulate than a striker-fired handgun in and out of your holster. They give you, double-action guns give you a more intentional first trigger press, which again is not going to be a problem for almost anybody in a self-defense situation to defeat that trigger. And then things like if you want the best trigger that you can get, including out of any striker fire handgun, you'd get a double stack 1911 with a single action only, straight back trigger pull. I recommend, and this is again my opinion, I recommend if you're getting one of these that you get one with the grip safety. Like I said, I've never had a problem. When you draw this gun, you're going to draw it, and there's a bump right here. So, I mean, even if I pull it down here, which if I pull it down here, we're in trouble anyway. I don't know if I can hold it, but if I pull the gun up here, I have no problem engaging the grip safety. There's no problem in sweeping the safety down. In fact, I use this. You know, if you're firing this gun, you can use this as a place to put your hand to control the recoil a little bit better. This just takes a little bit of, I would say this, out of all of these, this kind of firearm just takes a little bit more practice to get proficient with it. All right, so I hope that this gave you some food for thought if you're if you're looking for a new concealed carry or everyday carry handgun, and gives you some options to think about other than the standard striker fire handgun, action on a handgun. I've carried all 4 of these. They're all safe as long as you exercise some sort of common sense, and they're all pretty good choices. So anyway, if you like this kind of video, please subscribe to my channel. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day. Thanks.